Of all the horrible serial killers who have wreaked havoc on the general public, few are scarier than Jack the Ripper. He terrorized London with methods so brutal they still haunt us over a century later. Today we're going to break down why Jack the Ripper would stand no chance against Dexter Morgan. Jack the Ripper remains one of history's most notoriously elusive killers. Operating in London's Whitechapel district in 1888, he brutally murdered at least 5 women over the short span of just a few months. The exact number of his kills is still debated, with some estimating that Jack the Ripper may have had as many as 11 victims, but the 5 confirmed murders are known as the canonical 5. The victims, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Ebbowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, were all known sex workers in the area, and unfortunately the higher risks associated with their lifestyles made them more susceptible to becoming victims of the Ripper. What made Jack the Ripper stand out wasn't just the savagery of his crimes, but the uncanny precision he had when he carried them out. His victims were found with their throats slit and their bodies butchered. This suggested that the Ripper was not only filled with unanswered rage, but also had a disturbing understanding of human anatomy. The incisions he left on his victims were made with a level of skill that implied advanced medical knowledge, leading many to believe that he may have had surgical training, all of which made the idea of Jack the Ripper all the more frightening. I mean, just imagine if a random respected member of the community was helping patients during the day and stalking the streets at night. The world looks a lot less safe when we remember that monsters come in all shapes, sizes, and professions. We may never see the threat coming until it's too late, and Jack the Ripper is a constant reminder of that fact. The press heavily covered the murders, and public panic surged as letters from someone claiming to be from the Ripper were sent into newspapers and police stations. Some of these letters, like the infamous "From Hell" letter, described the killings in horrific detail, heightening the aura of mystery surrounding him. But we have to keep in mind that the Ripper's crimes occurred in an era before modern forensic science, which helped him evade capture. The police had to rely heavily on eyewitness accounts and underdeveloped detective techniques, neither of which were exactly effective in tracking a killer who worked under the cover of night, often in dense fog on the streets. So, despite countless investigations and theories over the years, the true identity of Jack the Ripper has never officially been proven. Suspects have ranged from, of course, the Polish hairdresser, to local butchers, to physicians, and even members of the British aristocracy. What makes Jack the Ripper so enduring in popular culture was all the questions left lingering. His case is an unsolved puzzle and the birth of modern serial killer mythology. His crimes exposed the failings of Victorian society. All of the poverty, class division, and a lack of social protection for women were on full display in the Ripper's wake. The underwhelming investigation into who he really was and how to stop him revealed the dark underbelly of an age otherwise associated with progress and refinement. Ultimately, Jack the Ripper's mystery and notoriety made him more than just a murderer. He was a symbol of fear and fascination, a shadowy figure who thrived in an era of ignorance and superstition. Over a century later, his legacy continues to haunt criminology, inspiring plenty of fictional stories centered on killers in an attempt to recapture his mystique. But beneath all the confusion he created, there is a stark truth. Jack the Ripper was less of a criminal mastermind and more of a predator who exploited the vulnerabilities of his time. And it's precisely those limitations that would make him no match for a hunter like Dexter Morgan. Jack the Ripper existed in a world without DNA testing, fingerprint databases, or even standardized crime scene photography. His ability to evade capture wasn't because he was some evil genius, it was because the system designed to catch him didn't exist yet. He thrived in a technological void. Now place him in Dexter's world, whether Miami or New York, the modern police would make a mockery of Jack the Ripper. A world with surveillance cameras on every block, satellite tracking, cell phone triangulation, drones, and advanced forensics would make him look like an overly confident amateur, Jack's time-consuming public dissections would make him a simple enough case for Miami Metro. He'd leave a trail of blood, skin cells, footprints, and who knows what else everywhere. Miami Metro locked in on the ice truck killer using a lozenge wrapper he left at the crime scene where he held Anthony Tucci. ITK was way more careful than the Ripper, and he was still caught. Both Dexter and the detectives at Miami Metro eventually learned his true identity and tracked him down. Dexter was even able to trick ITK and manipulate him into a trap and lure him to his death. Much like ITK, Jack the Ripper went around killing women with lower social status and leaving their remains throughout the city to intentionally be found by police. But unlike ITK, the Ripper's methods were less refined and almost implied a high level of compulsion. If the confrontation took place in modern times, Jack would instantly be at a disadvantage. He would likely be on Dexter's radar almost instantly. Within days of his first grisly kill, Dexter would have access to every police photo, every autopsy report, and every piece of blood evidence. He'd analyze the shit out of those spatter patterns, the weapon angles, the incision depth, and the timeline, and within a week, he'd know the killer's height, dominant hand, likely occupation, and area of operation, and more. Even if it took weeks, Dexter would take his time to vet the potential perpetrators until he found out who was responsible. Think about it. Before you watch any further, I'm happy to finally announce that I'm releasing the first limited drop of my t-shirts. At the start, there are only 100 available, so make sure you buy them while you can at dtmerch.store. Enjoy the video. Dexter almost always gets his man. Plenty of the people who ended up on his table were trying their best to fly under the radar in some sort of way. Some of them were basically completely off the grid, and Dexter got to them regardless. Ronald Red Schmidt, the dark passenger who was terrorizing rideshare drivers in New York City, went to incredible lengths to hide his identity. He had no online presence, lived alone, and even wore a specialized hoodie so that he couldn't be captured by cameras when he was orchestrating a kill. He didn't have any children, family, or partners that could be used to track him down either. Even with all of this, Dexter found him in 3 days, and that was without any police assistance. There is just no chance that Jack the Ripper would have been more difficult to hunt down than Red, the stealthiest serial killer Dexter has ever set his sights on. Once Dexter saw his disgusting crimes, Jack the Ripper would be ripe for the picking. Now reverse it. Put Dexter in Jack's 1888 London. No cameras, no labs, no databases. Does Dexter fall apart without technology? Nah, not even close. Dexter's efficiency doesn't depend on modern tools. Those just make his job tracking killers down faster and easier. His true skill lies in his aptitude for pattern recognition, psychological analysis, deduction, and human behavior mapping. In 1888, Dexter would still be a master at tracking people. He would study the similarities shared by the victims, cross-reference sightings of possible suspects, map out the locations of the attacks, and use behavioral prediction to find the Ripper in due time. Dexter would adapt, blend in, and use the chaos to his advantage as always. The same darkness that Jack the Ripper hid inside of would become Dexter's camouflage. Just like with Red, Dexter wouldn't need fancy tools or police advantages to find the Ripper. In both timelines, one thing is constant. Dexter thrives both in structure and in chaos. Jack only remains active and free in a world with no advanced forensics and no one like Dexter around. Dexter's forensic mind would build a psychological and physical profile of the Ripper faster than any task force could. Once he had that profile, it would only be a matter of time before he narrowed down the suspect list to one man. The fact of the matter is that as soon as someone smarter enters the game, the luck for Jack the Ripper ends pretty quickly. A showdown between Dexter Morgan and Jack the Ripper would be a clash between two killers separated by time, method, and intelligence, and it wouldn't be a fair fight. Dexter is the evolved predator, trained to hide and kill from a young age. He was also incredibly smart. He was top of his class in college and very well trained in the field of forensics, criminal psychology, and technology. Jack the Ripper while terrifying in his era, relied on unpredictable confusion, anonymity, and the dark elements of 19th century London to stay hidden. Put them in the same world, whether in Victorian London or modern Miami, and Dexter's meticulous, calculated approach would easily allow him to expose and eliminate the Ripper before he even realized he was being hunted. Summed up, the point is that Dexter would get Jack on the ropes with little issue. The Ripper's sloppiness would be his downfall. His crimes were gruesome, but they lacked strategy beyond the choice of vulnerable victims and dimly lit streets. His reliance on the police's uncertainty and public panic might have worked for him back in his day, but in a world with more sophisticated tools and methods, that formula would be obsolete. And even if Dexter were somehow transported to Victorian London and was stripped of modern tools, all of his book smarts and training would still set him apart. He would adjust quickly, understanding how to exploit Jack's patterns and ego while honoring the first rule of his code to never get caught. Basically, where the police failed because they didn't understand the psychology of a serial killer, Dexter would succeed because he is one. The key difference between Dexter and Jack the Ripper lies in both their motives and ability to exercise control. Jack the Ripper killed impulsively, driven by rage and random impulse. His crimes were messy expressions of dominance and misogyny, not methodical acts of purpose. Dexter, on the other hand, follows the code, his father's strict moral guidelines that channels his dark urges toward those who deserve it. This discipline is what makes him so lethal. He doesn't kill out of frenzy, he kills with intention. Against the Ripper, Dexter's patience would be his greatest weapon. He would study the Ripper, blend into his surroundings, and wait for the perfect opportunity to strike. In a modern setting, Dexter would likely infiltrate the investigation into the murders himself, pretending to be an expert consultant or analyst of some sort. While the police floundered, Dexter would quietly track the killer's movements. Once he found the Ripper's hunting grounds, which included various dark alleys, streets near brothels, or largely abandoned parts of town, he'd set a trap. The Ripper, driven by his ritualistic compulsion, wouldn't be able to resist returning to familiar territory. Dexter would be waiting, calm and precise, turning the tables on the hunter. How many times has Dexter taken down one of his targets by catching them off guard in the dark, just as they were about to try to pull off another attack? In Resurrection, there is a great example of this. After meeting Lowell Sloan at the dinner party for serial killers organized by Leon Prater, Dexter realized in no time that Lowell had to be the first to go. Known as the Tattoo Collector, Lowell planned on skinning and killing his next victim while he was in New York, and he planned to do it within a few days of having met Dexter. Once Dexter knew this, he called Lowell up for a drink and then followed him as he closed in on the young woman he planned to victimize. Lowell and his victim were walking up a dark street with few witnesses, and Lowell planned to knock her out using anesthesia before taking her away to be flayed. But Dexter turned the tables on him, using the gas on Lowell without the young woman even ever realizing how close she had just come to death. In just a few moments after that, Lowell was strapped to a kill table with a knife buried in his chest, and his body parts found their way to a furnace to eliminate any evidence. It was almost too easy for a predator like Dexter, and the Tattoo Collector isn't the only killer Dexter was able to catch using the cover of night. Levi Reed was another serial killer Dexter got to as he was distracted late at night in an alleyway. Dexter snuck up behind him and stuck him with an M99 tranquilizer and got Levi on his table in no time. So we can see clearly that while working at night seemed to be useful for Jack the Ripper when he only had the police to worry about, operating in the dark would only make Dexter's job of eliminating him even easier. As a killer himself, and a far more prolific and proficient one, having to find the Ripper at night would only be an advantage for Dexter. And what's more is that if the showdown took place in modern days, Dexter would have no issue getting rid of the body and leaving no evidence. So he would definitely get away with this extrajudicial justice as usual. But if it happened in the 1800s, he would have an even easier time evading capture. He wouldn't have to worry about all the plastic wrap and gloves. Fingerprints weren't used to convict anyone until the very early 1900s, and even then it wasn't widespread yet. Jack the Ripper left the bodies of his victims out in plain sight, because he knew that there would be no way for authorities to trace them back to him. Dexter would have the exact same advantage. He could kill Jack and flee without even having to concern himself with disposing of the body. No chopping, bagging, or dumping required, unless he just felt like it, of course. There is just no way that Dexter would get caught after killing the Ripper when the Ripper managed to stay undetected after committing 5 murders, if not more. So the hardest part of Dexter's job in facing off with Jack the Ripper would be hunting him down, and as previously discussed, that wouldn't be that hard either. Because he was never captured or identified, little is known about the physical abilities of the Ripper, but given his MO, it's not too far-fetched to assume he wasn't exactly physically menacing or intimidating. Think about his ideal victim. Jack the Ripper never attacked men, opting instead to go after underprivileged women. The women were almost definitely smaller than him, and he could easily overpower them if necessary, something he probably wouldn't have felt so confident doing with a man. But even given the smaller stature of the women, he still didn't seem to engage in any hand-to-hand combat with. Instead, he chose to use sharp tools to control, subdue, murder, and mutilate them. He was clearly a coward with no confidence in his ability to take on someone his own size, and for all we know, that size could have been below average for him. This is just another reason that going up against Dexter would go poorly for Jack the Ripper. Dexter has no problem with fighting with his hands. He's strong, even well into his midlife, and he's trained in jiu-jitsu. He's taken on plenty of other trained killers who were physically intimidating and still managed to come out on top. He has scuffled with some people, as strong as Dokes and as agile as Zoe Kruger. He has moved bodies as big as Little Chino and Ray Speltzer, and they were massive compared to him. Not only that, but Dexter has been stabbed during altercations, shot in the leg while handcuffed, pretty sure he got in a car accident at least twice, and even shot directly in the chest, and none of that was enough to keep him down. So if he and Jack the Ripper were ever alone together in a dimly lit alley, even if Jack saw Dexter coming after him, it wouldn't matter. Dexter could and would overpower the Ripper, and everything about his past indicates as much. This is just another area in which Dexter has the advantage, and Jack the Ripper is left looking like the foolish and incompetent amateur when compared to someone like Dexter. Ultimately, this showdown wouldn't last long. Jack would never understand that he was being analyzed and hunted. His arrogance and reliance on mystery would blind him to the fact that Dexter performs quite well in shadows far darker than those on the streets where the Ripper operated. Dexter doesn't need to match Jack's brutality, because he surpasses it with his impressive knowledge of human psychology and the precision he always has when he has a known target. Jack represents the primal chaos of an early serial killer, but Dexter represents a more refined, evolved form of. In the end, Jack the Ripper would be no more than another body on Dexter's table. He would be nothing but a cautionary example of what happens when a primitive predator crosses paths with a more perfected and morally driven version of his same species. Dexter, as usual, comes out on top. Do you think Jack the Ripper would have a better chance in modern day? Would he go from alley stalking to internet stalking? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to slash that like button.